He is an edifice in the sphere of storytelling and an ace in producing captivating content. Geoff Glick is a family man and fiercely talented sports media executive and founder now of Peaceful Luck Media. He's worked at Intersport and NBC Sports Chicago, among other entities. And fortunate for you, he joins me today on the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a broadcaster doing tennis, golf, volleyball, basketball, and other sports. And this is a platform where we highlight the human sides of those who work in media. So you're going to get a look at just as much of what he's done in his career as he is at home as a husband and a father of two daughters, in what is going to be a never seen before unfiltered peek into his own life. And as we do so, we uncover stories that will inspire you. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe. Now that you've done that, here it is, my chat with Geoff. He's one of the best storytellers that I've had the pleasure of watching. Geoff, I am excited to have you on, and this is a bit different because now the camera is pointed on you. How are you going to handle that, though? You're usually the one that is canvassing others. Now
Absolutely.
you are being canvassed.
It's kind of frightening. Some days I've spent most of my career behind, though I will admit, when I was working at NBC for a long time, my parents loved to look for me on camera in the background of other interviews, or you do the group interviews, and it's like, oh look, there's my son behind the camera. That's the only way that they can recognize that I was there. So I make rare cameos, or I try to make sure I was always out of my cameraman shot.
How often would you show up with a background, say in the newsroom there in Chicago?
Let's see, every few weeks, sometimes on other people's stations more often. I'd stay out of my camera, but I'm in somebody else's camera. I will admit, like a couple times when I was first working there, and we had one of those sets that was open to the newsroom, and people didn't believe that you worked there. I was like, hey, hold on the phone, and I would walk in the back of the anchors, and then they'd see you walk past and pop back in, and that's the only way that you can acknowledge when you're behind the scenes that sometimes that you work there.
How do you feel in which those who work in this business behind the scenes could get more attention? What do you think it would take for that to happen? Because there are so many incredible, bright people that have done such invaluable work in this industry. What do you think it would take to get more eyes on them because they deserve it?
Kind of a double-edged sword because a lot of us who work behind the scenes like it that way.
Right.
And it's not a self-promotion. It's about the work. It's not necessarily about, for me, I'm a terrible self-promoter. So it's about the work. And as long as the work's successful, then we're successful. I also sometimes worry that I know people really interested in how the sausage is made, is the terrible analogy, but sometimes it's control chaos. Sometimes it feels like a train wreck when you're doing live stuff. But I think, podcasts like yourself, I just think in the social media world, you're able to promote yourself in a different way, and people can promote the projects that they're working on and doing the stuff that they can without it necessarily feeling awkward or anything like that. And I think it's up to each individual person of how they really want to be seen in the world, really.
How do you feel like you've been seen in the world as far as the story that people know you for in terms of those who are your friends, and what do they know you best for?
Kind of interesting. So I spent a lot of time in my career working in sports. So, and I do a lot of non-sports stuff now, but I obviously have done a lot of sports my entire career. If you walked in my house, you would have no idea what I do for a living. Zero. Not, I mean, I think I'm hiding it, but there's an award or two behind me. But for the most part, there's no sports memorabilia around my house. I'm married with, two daughters, whose sports interest is decent at best. It's odd that way. But at the same time, I think, my friends around me, they know what I do, but I don't think it's always something I put forward front and center. It's always something I kind of always wanted to do as part of my life. And I don't know, you asked me the tough question off the top. You caught me here, but no, I think people know, they always think I have the coolest job in the world. The people I talk to are always like, you meet cool people, you go to events, you do this. And it's like, yeah, I do all the cool stuff. Sometimes though, you're there in the tunnels and you're down in the barrels, or you're in the truck and you're at the event, but you're not at the event. It's not the same way as you're playing or you're performing or doing it, stuff like that. It's I produced a Smashing Pumpkins concert back in October at a 1,000-seat little venue over here in Chicago that's across the street from Wrigley Field, but our gear didn't fit downstairs in the basement. So we literally produced it from the back of our U-Haul, like trailer, and ran cables back into the house. So it's like, were you at the event? Well, I was in the venue for, dress rehearsal, but for the rest of it, I was literally sitting outside, working out of a small U-Haul truck. And then it started raining, and we put a tent up and all those kinds of things. It's like you're there, you're part of it, but you're not necessarily in it. And you're not, it's work, it's different. So
Logistically, you look back and you said, how did I do that when it came to you putting on that event with Smashing Pumpkins?
mhm.
What did that take out of you as far as what that showed that you're capable of in handling, as you said earlier, just another sign of being good in mass chaos, and how
Yes,
maybe that experience in television all those years and working on deadlines and stuff helped you thrive in a moment like that which you were just describing?
absolutely. I mean, literally, it was the second concert I've ever produced. I've probably spent most of my career doing things. I always say there's things in this business I haven't done, but there's nothing I can't do. And that's kind of the mentality that I tackle it with, and my skills are always feel like they're transferable. I got the call to do the concert 2 weeks before. They literally, I got a phone
Wow.
call 2 weeks ahead. Hey, we have this opportunity. Could you produce the show for us? Yes. Can you staff it for us? Yes. And that's literally, then you're on the phone with the bands and the venue and walking through and doing that whole thing. And then until you get there that day, you're never really sure how it's all going to play out, and putting cameras in and dealing with music. And then it started to pour rain while we were shooting stand-ups with my host that night. And it was a circus. But that should, it's how it always should be. Just because it feels chaotic or a train wreck behind the scenes, sometimes it should never look like that on the air. And you keep your calm. Like there's no reason to freak out. And you surround yourself with people who are good at what they do and know what their jobs are and know what their roles are, and you trust them to do that. And everything, I have always found that things work out better that way. If you start to micromanage and you start to freak out and yell and scream and rant and rave, you don't really get the best out of anybody at all. So that's just not the attitude that I carry into every project. And so when you're calm and collected and confident, like that, I always feel like things kind of turn out.
Yeah, when you're calm, cool, and collected in that mind frame, I feel like you get the best version of yourself in what you're capable of doing from a skill set and a talent perspective. Where do you find peace, though, outside of just the scope of work? Where does that come out for you in your life?
Hanging out with my family, hanging out with my kids, seeing them really succeed and do the things they like to do. My younger daughter is 12, is an ice skater, and she's a designer. She has her own jewelry business, literally, and she built her own website online during the pandemic. It's crazy. And she's super creative in that way. And my older daughter, who's 15, gonna be a sophomore in high school, she dances to like 16 hours a week. She's gonna push it to like 20 hours a week. I mean, her commitment is unbelievable. And they're athletic in their own ways, and just seeing them succeed. And then for me also, it's just getting away, trying to turn off the phones, turn off, when you're kind of running your own business, it's up to you to decide when you want to walk away from things and take a break. And so that's what I try to do, whether it's reading or, getting outside, hanging out by the water here in Chicago by Lake Michigan. I think it's just those are the types of opportunities that get you to relax.
I was wondering, as far as relaxing, you talked about how your daughter is a dancer.
Mhm.
How do you ever find yourself, and maybe I'm totally making this up, but you as a dancer, how relaxing would that be if,
Awful.
say, your
Awful.
daughter is
No, 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 no,
watching
no,
you do
terrible.
that?
No, 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 it's terrible. I have no. None of it. No, that's my wife's side. That's not me at all. No, there would be, would be pure anxiety. I could never do what she does like that.
You have been able to do everything that you've done from a career standpoint, and also having this family. What do you want them in your, especially most importantly, as you watch your daughters grow, what do you want them to know about what you do and how you've done it, the outlook of which you've gone about your work?
It's interesting you asked. It was actually one of the biggest reasons I left NBC after 17 plus years there. Part of it was just, the business was changing. Part of it was I was burnt out. Part of it was I felt like I had taken the job as far as I could. But also, it was 2015. The Blackhawks were going through their third Stanley Cup run, where they ended up winning their third championship. And every time the Hawks would win a game, we had the games on our air, and I was doing pregame and postgame, and
Yeah.
I was in the middle of the stretch of like working 30 out of 32 days. And my kids, every time the Hawks would win at night, they'd be like, "Sorry, Dad, I know you have to work," and soul crushing. Neighbors coming up to me being like, "Sorry, I know this is like hard for you. It's great that everybody's happy winning, but for you, it's a lot more work. It's a lot more time consuming." And for me, I always needed like I wasn't sure if my girls were always going to be like huge sports fans, but I wanted them to appreciate it,
Yeah.
and I wanted them to enjoy it and going to games and doing stuff like that. And it was never going to happen if I was always at work. And that was part of the reason that I kind of one of the last straws in terms of like leaving the editorial side and the news side for me at that time was just to be around them, to be able to spend some more time with them, to have opportunities where you didn't always have to feel like you'd be replaced. And so for me, a lot as I've gotten older, it's a lot more about this is what I do, but this isn't necessarily who I am. And I think, it's just instilling that in them and but also, teaching them that like this was my dream jobs when I was a kid. And I got the dream job when I was 24 years old in a position that I probably shouldn't have been in and was lucky to have, and then ended up being at that, station for 17 years. So I can kind of tell both sides of the story for them.
That idea, that what you just said about how this is what I do, but this is not necessarily who I am when you're talking about your work. And you told the earlier anecdote about how if I were to walk into your house, I wouldn't really know what you do,
Mhm.
which for those in this industry, that's not something you see every day. Usually you're going into a producer's house and you're finding an Emmy there and an Emmy there, and here's a picture with this broadcaster or this event we did, and dotting all over the house, you're going to find sports memorabilia and television stuff. For you to not necessarily have that, how have you gotten to that space? And why is it so hard for so many in this industry to separate themselves from what they do?
I think it's two things. I was like, as a kid, I was never an autograph kid. Like, I was never take a photo with me kind of guy. Part of it was probably being shy and just not wanting to go up and ask. But the other was just not, I don't know, it's never been my thing. And I've interviewed the biggest names in the sport, right? The first group interview I ever did in the locker room was Mario Lemieux in 90, gosh, I'm going to take myself, 95, 96. It was like his return to Chicago after he'd had the Hodgkins and stuff like that and came back. Um, I've interviewed Jordan and I've interviewed Tiger and, like I've been in all those places, but I don't have photos of them, but I have the memories of them. And I just never felt like the need of like, hey, let's take pictures with the people I just interviewed. To me, it's weird. To me, I feel like journalistically it was always odd. Like there's always a barrier, kind of like separation of church
Sure.
and state a little bit.
Sure.
Um, and then from a memorabilia side, I don't know, it's just never my thing. And I'll be honest, as I went through this business, when I started in this business, I always tell people I love sports and I like TV or I liked content production or whatever you want to call it these days. By the time I left NBC, it had flipped. So I really was like in love with the content and production side. I
Mm.
was less in love with the sports side because when you start to cover the teams that you grew up with and you rooted for, it's a different relationship. It's a whole different. It's more about what's easier for my work life. It's not about did they win, did they lose. Let's be honest, my life is easier when they lose. Sometimes, as much as people don't like to hear it, whether that's talk radio or Sunday night sports shows or whatever, whatever talking head shows you want to talk about, hot takes, losses are more interesting. Winning, the ratings are better for winning sometimes, but the shows are less interesting because everybody's just, clapping you on the back and there's less, a conversation's less spirited. It doesn't have to be hot taking, but it's just, that's how it kind of comes across. So, I mean, I think that's been the other thing. It's just, finding your love again for the things that you like, or some loves come back and some don't. And, it's just how it comes. But for me, yeah, I don't have the photos of it, but I have the memories in my head and I can tell the stories, and that's good enough for me.
How do you keep those memories alive, especially when you don't have them photographed? Is it something where it comes to sharing them? Where
Yeah.
for you is your way of processing them and keeping them alive?
I think it's just telling the stories, or at least the ones that are appropriate and easy. And they're good to tell for public consumption, as they always say. Because you hear lots of things and you're involved in lots of things and you see things and you're like, Yeah, that's not as good for public as it, for everybody else. But I think it's just trying to tell those stories and pass them down and talk about them amongst my friends, without it feeling like it's bragging either. It's just because the other thing people are like, "Oh, that's the coolest thing." It's like it was, but it's different. Like when you're in the work, like your mind's already racing to, well, how do I get this on the air? Or how do I produce this? Or you know, it's it's different. It's and then when you've like kind of covered your idols in a way, it's a different process for me. Like I grew up, my two biggest, sports heroes are like Walter Payton, Michael Jordan. So I've interviewed Michael, I met Walter, and then the first obit I ever produced was for Walter Payton. So, there's an emotional pull to it that's just different. And I just learned that kind of like those people, they're all people. They're not, it's not necessarily heroes and gods, and you look up to them in that way. And so that's my mentality in terms of doing that. But we love to tell the stories that go around it as well.
Being in the back channels of what's happening with these athletes, you
Mhm.
see a side of them that not the public sees. And so, sure, they're always going to be heroes, but they're also human. And that's where I think you're able to see, yeah, it's understandable why we lionize these athletes and make them to be who they are. But at the same time, no human is perfect. But what I learn a lot about what you're saying as I'm taking in this conversation, Geoff, is that your life seems to be determined a lot in living with no regrets, especially with the way in which you've made this change in your career to be with your family more. How has your life changed in that sense of being with your family more? Specifically, how has that affected you personally?
Um, it's definitely different. It's My kids were younger when I left the day to day news business and moved into like the media marketing world. That's a little bit about like you're producing events, but it's not necessarily as editorial. It's slowed down. In fact, like I had to get used to a pace that was much slower. I had to learn to turn my brain off. When Twitter became super important with how people cover events and cover news, and it's hard to turn your brain off. When I first moved to Intersport, like I came home that first week, my wife's like, "You look exhausted." And I said, "Yeah, but it's different. It's not that the job's tiring. My body's looking for these adrenaline rushes that don't exist. Like it's used to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, take a break for 2 hours and come back at 10 and like, oh, I think we're gonna rip things up and change and that kind of thing." And actually, I was doing a project for KPMG. We're doing like women's like a leadership golf conference at the Women's PGA Championship, and we were doing live stream like podcast stuff. And I had an editor who was like cutting up all the bites from during the day, and it was like flipping them for social. He walks after 8 hours, and he's like, "This is exhausting." He's like, "You used to do this?" I'm like, "Every day for like 16, 17 years." I'm like, "Your one day like doesn't phase me." Um, so it's nice though in that it gives you a little more balance. Um, I think my kids appreciate it. I think my wife appreciates it. It's actually funny when I have to go away or when I have to travel more. They're not used to it. And they're like, "Where are you going? What do you mean you got to work on this weekend or you got to do this at nights?" It's like, well, my schedule's a little different. It's just off. And it was nice during the pandemic to be home and to work from the house. So, and I continue to work from my home. All you're talking to me from my home office. So, I actually produce shows from sitting right here at my house. As oddly that is in the new technological world that we live in. So,
That seems to be the way this industry is trending. And the fact that you have now, I would think, this pent up adrenaline that you're
mhm.
not being able to utilize, where does it go? Because it's not like it just all of a sudden goes away. It's there somewhere within Geoff. Where is it now and how is it being used?
Goes into more creativity, trying to come up with own ideas of my own and stuff that I'm trying to create and build out on its own in terms of projects and opportunities from that standpoint. Sometimes you have to create your own adrenaline rushes and find them for yourselves and create your own deadlines and create your own kind of things and challenges for that. Um, and also, it's just in the different kinds of work. Like for me, it's taking on new challenges, it's trying different things. It's coming up with different opportunities for people, not just from a production standpoint, but from an ideation standpoint, a strategy standpoint, and working with kinds of companies that I never would have thought, like working with a direct to consumer wine company and helping them source, a celebrity endorser and a partner for their company. Helping some other friends do some startup type stuff. in this business that had really nothing to do. I was working with a financial services company that was trying to help them redo their website and change their messaging. And, it's not my background at all. And I was working with another consultant for the project. He's like, you've learned this business better than most. And when we're talking about financial, like ETF funds that are there for when the market's not good, and it's not fun and necessarily, it's not sexy, but those are the projects that you learn the most. So for me, that's where the adrenaline rush is coming.
Well, and it seems as if like you're really good at predicting how the industry is going to go, or at least trying to look ahead and see what's happening before it does happen.
Mhm.
Your antennas into doing that, how do you feel like that's helped you create the world that you're living in right now and what you're doing?
It's good and it's bad. I talked to some people. My whole thing is my brain kind of functions because of the work that I've done in the past and living in that live moment of planning 4 steps ahead, of always being prepared for how do I escape, right? So if this goes bad or this goes wrong or the weather guy goes 2.5 minutes long, which happens it used to happen all the time.
Oh yeah.
What am I going to do to bail out or help out the producer so we can get off the air on time and clean it? So I'm always thinking that way, but I sometimes have to slow myself down. Hey, wait a minute, we have to take care of step 1 and step 2 before I get to step 4. But I'm already planning for step 4. So for me, that's really where it comes from. I think it's just consuming a lot of content everywhere and seeing what makes sense. I watch the consumption habits of my kids, of how they
Mm.
watch, and what they're into, and I think you have to adapt to that. The world's constantly changing. It's weird because this business is less than 100 years old. So it's a baby considered, and how everything changes now. Um, but how people can, people have the greatest need for being entertained or for being informed, but how they go about doing that is completely different. And I think the longer we cling on to the ways of the past, it just makes things more difficult.
You mentioned that you cling on and observe the viewing habits of your kids and what they digest as far as content. What is
Yes,
it that they watch that you like to watch with them the most?
I like to watch with them. That is a whole different animal. I watch a lot of reality shows with them, like game show style reality type shows. I've watched not just cooking shows, which I'm good with, but I've seen like the makeup competitions and the fashion design competitions, and those are the things we probably watch the most of. The movies are kind of hit and miss. They end up watching stuff before I get the chance to watch with them. They like what I prefer to watch on a large television screen. They want to watch on their phones. I think it's crazy to watch gigantic movies on your phones, but like they love stuff that's like 6 inches away from their face. It's interesting to watch them get frustrated when shows aren't bingeable and they come out once a week. And you tell them, well, that's the way it's always been, or that's the way it was, or can you imagine if you missed the show and you got to wait 3 months to see it? And it's a concept they can't even grasp. Um, so, but yeah, I probably watch a lot of like reality style, like contest type show, game show type things with them.
If you were to be the focal point of a reality TV show, what would it
Nobody wants to watch that.
what would it be? Okay, you think nobody would find it interesting. I beg to differ. But if you were to do one, what do you think it would center on?
It's a good question. I think it centers on somebody who's really trying to find themselves, right? So I think it's a nice therapy session I got going here, Bryan. I really appreciate this. And let me put it to you this way. I got my dream job when I was 24 years old. Coming out of Syracuse, I worked in radio for a year and a half, and I got hired at NBC in Chicago with zero television experience in a job that I thought was entry level part time. And it was union, and I was making more money in a day than my uncle who had worked in the business thought I was just going to make in a week. So, and I worked in news and worked my way into sports. And within a year, I was producing sports full time at the age of 25, right after Jordan retired the second time. So since then, it's really been like finding my way. Like, what do you want to do? People always ask, like, well, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? I'm always still trying to figure that out. So I think if you had a reality show for me, like it's it's finding my way through what are the things I want to do next? Where are the places that I want to be? Do I want to continue to work for myself? Do I want to go work with a larger company? Do I want to work with a production company? Do I want, do I want to be more brand side? Where am I most comfortable? Because I've done a lot of things and I never want to be considered like a jack of all trades and a master of none. But I do know that my skills transfer all over the place, and it's always trying to figure those things out. I think part of the other reason that when I left NBC, the other reason, that we talked about earlier was I knew I was good at what I did, but was I really good at it because of I knew how to do it in one place and I kind of knew the shortcuts and how to make that happen, or was I really good because my skills are really good and they're transferable to anything? And since then, over the last pushing 8 years, I realized I'm really good at it, and it has nothing to do with location. And I've been able to validate that not through myself, but just talking with other people and people that I've mentored and continued relationships with as well, and talent that I've worked with. So I
In
think that would be the reality show. I don't know if it would be super exciting. I don't know if there'd be enough conflict for it. It's not Vanderpump Rules, but it is what that's their show.
I find that it would be interesting, and I think you'd be surprised how entertaining it would be. Although I think a lot of people have to realize that a lot of these reality shows, there's some planning that goes into it,
There's a
and
lot of planning that goes.
unfortunately, but if we were able to not have that, I still think that it would be fun because yeah, when you say reality show, to what extent in general, what are we seeing here? Because yeah, there are some things that are contrived, but as you look, always researching
Mhm.
for what's next and what you're doing and projects and this, and always have, as we said earlier, your antennas up. How happy are you with where you are right now in your life?
I'm happy that I've been able to build a business on my own, to produce the types of projects, to create the kind of partners. So my company is called Peaceful Luck Media, and I chose that name for two separate reasons. One is simply peaceful. Geoff means peaceful, and Glick means luck. So it's kind of practical from that standpoint, but it's not slapping your own name on a company. But secondly, peaceful really means I work with people that bring me kind of some inner peace and bring me the inner happiness of I choose my partners and I work with the people that I enjoy working with, and that's why I do it. And the luck part is I'm fortunate to help them kind of bring their content dreams to life, and their ideas and what that is. And I've done everything from like the last 4 years, talk shows, concerts, more social issue, social oriented issue shows. I've done a bunch of public affairs work lately. It's a little bit of everything, and I like that variety, and it's been good. And it's choosing the opportunities for that. So for me, that's where I'm at.
So you really like to, because some people can get so in this industry, they can get so tethered to one thing and get really good at it. And at that point, it becomes robotic. What is it internally with you that has this general curiosity in trying new things that you've never done before and putting yourself out there and sort of exploring the unknown, if you will?
Absolutely, I think it's from part of it's from coming doing the same thing over and over for 17 years. So it's
Yeah.
looking for something that's completely different. I think for me, that's the joy is being able to build and create from scratch and putting it together with a team and having that sense of accomplishment. I think for me is incredibly fulfilling. I like finding chemistry amongst on our talent and putting people together and seeing it flourish. Um, I enjoy I found out that I've enjoyed mentoring talent people a lot more than I thought I would. I always thought I was a terrible teacher, but I would really good if you ask me like 1,000 questions. I'll answer whatever you want to know. And I've kept other relationships, and a lot of the people I work with are people I've worked with that were younger that are my camera operators, my editors, and people that I trust. And I think it's just I put a lot of trust in them and say like, go do it, like be creative. I trust you to do what you want to do. Um, I think for me also just trying different things. It's not about like I want to do only basketball content. Why don't I just do this? For me, it's just storytelling in general, right? And whether it's editorial or it's brand focused or it's somewhere in the middle, to me, it's about can you create stories? Can you tell stories that create an emotion in your audience? And that will then spur them to action, whether that's to watch it more often, to buy your product, to know that your product exists, like however that is. You can go on LinkedIn 1,000 times. People are talking about storytelling. I read on the internet, 100 sites. Everybody's talking about the key to storytelling, and everybody talks about trying to figure out how do we get our audience to take action, but they don't focus as much on you got to connect with them emotionally. somehow, some way, whether that's curiosity. I'm not saying like you have to make them cry. That's always nice. But because I even had a producer once who told me they were uncomfortable making a subject cry when they were doing it, like an emotional type story. And I was like, no, that's your job. Your job is to
Yeah.
pull the emotion out. And whatever it is, as long as it's authentic, that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to manipulate it, but I am here to bring it out. Can I just get people to be honest and open? And those are the types of stories I want to tell. And it doesn't matter to me what the venue is or what the platform is. To me, it's just about storytelling and where can I do it best.
If we were to wrap this conversation up in what you said, and I love that, and I think that you're absolutely right, it's the emotions that we remember, not always necessarily the content of the conversation. It's how you felt in
Mm-hmm.
those moments. But where do you find in your life your emotions have been most noticeable?
Keep them in check from a career standpoint as much as I possibly can. Um, I think it's seeing in people. I just had this conversation with my wife in terms of career transitions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I read it somewhere, somebody else said it and I followed it. And it's, you want to be remembered for how you treated people and not for the work that you do, because that will last longer. No one's going to remember, I produced this nice sportscast or I did this nice piece, but it's how you treated people, right? And as a leader, as someone who's led a lot of production teams and built teams and done all this, my job isn't to be the boss and to tell you what to do or to tell you how to do things. That's not how I want to do. My job is to put you in the best position to succeed. And by the end, like when the product works, you see all these football coaches and it's like, we're gonna run through the wall, we're gonna do this. And it's like, yeah, but you asked them to do that. The whole goal is you want your team, you want the people you work with to go that extra mile, not because you asked them to, but because they put their faith in you, or I put the faith that I put in them,
Yeah.
they want to reward, and they want to go that extra mile for that reason. And I've had people tell me that in the past, and that's kind of where it felt like it's one of those emotions that like you know it exists, but you don't really verbalize it until other people kind of acknowledge it. And the fact that I've been able to maintain relationships with people I've worked with for 20 plus years, and whether I work for them for a day, a week, a month. I was messaging with Kate Scott, the play-by-play announcer for the Sixers. She and I worked together a few years back in Adidas women's sports program, and she'd never done play-by-play for women's volleyball or soccer. And this was like high school, right? But she's doing play-by-play for Fox for Women's World Cup. And she's like, without that opportunity where you trusted me to do a sport that I'd never done, I don't get to do Women's World Cup for Fox if I don't do high school soccer for you for Adidas that aired on Twitter. So, it's being able to impact people that way. And to me, it's a people business. It's not, it's about people and stories. And that's what's most important for me.
It's a beautiful ending to this conversation because what seems to be prevailing in those who you've worked with and those who you've come across is a level of gratitude they have for you. And it's not that like you're feeding off of it and you crave it, but you appreciate it because you
Yes.
have opened up the doors for a lot of people. And in essence, that is the part of you that I really wanted to get out there in this conversation. And it's only fitting that we finished on that high note because it really does encapsulate the person that you are. Geoff, I'm Bryan Fenley. Thanks so much for doing this, man. This was so much fun.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Had a great time.